There is a room in London so absurd, the owners still keep it locked. A single red bell inside is tied to a century-old death pact, and hearing its ring has sealed the fate of everyone who dared to stay. I'm exposing the unspeakable truth behind the city's most cursed address. Stay until the end to hear what Sir Robert Warboys saw in his final moments. Late in the year 1840, the iron key changed hands under gaslight, heavy in the palm of Sir Robert Warboys, its cold weight carrying more history than anyone present cared to acknowledge. The house at 50 Berkeley Square stood in perfect silence, its brick facade immaculate, its windows dark and unwelcoming, as if the building itself were listening to the footsteps of the men gathered at its door. London, beyond the square, breathed and moved, carriages rolling and voices echoing faintly. But within the boundaries of the garden and the surrounding townhouses, there was a stillness that pressed down on the chest. Sir Robert Warboys was 30 years old, a man whose title suggested restraint and decorum, yet whose reputation among his peers told a different story. He was known less for lineage and more for appetite for risk, for defiance, for wagers that pushed past reason and into recklessness. Challenges attracted him the way flame attracts moths, not because he underestimated danger, but because he believed danger was exaggerated by weaker men. To him, fear was a social construct, a fiction maintained by those unwilling to test its limits. The man who opened the door that night was Charles Benson, a member of the same gentleman's club, a man spoken about in murmurs long before he was ever spoken to directly. He lived alone in the house now, though the house had not always been quiet, and not all its previous occupants had left willingly. Benson's expression, as he looked at Warboys, was not irritation nor surprise, but something closer to resignation, as though he were watching a scene already played out in his mind many times before. Inside, the dining room bore the marks of wealth, without warmth polished wood, restrained elegance, furniture chosen for status rather than comfort. When Charles Benson placed the iron key on the table, conversation evaporated. The object seemed to drain sound from the room. Benson explained that in the decade he had owned the house, the key had rarely been used, and when it was not in use, it was hidden. He did not elaborate on why. He did not need to. Every man seated at the table understood what the key represented. They climbed the stairs together, the wood groaning beneath their weight, each step sounding louder than the last. The second-floor hallway narrowed like a throat, the air growing cooler as they approached the closed door at the end. It was unremarkable in appearance. No markings, no warnings, no signs of distinction from any other bedroom door in a house built for the elite. And yet no one stood close to it, except Sir Robert Warboys. The key turned, the door opened. The room revealed itself slowly, lamplight spilling across polished furniture, a four-poster bed, standing in quiet dignity, a dresser with a circular mirror, reflecting faces pale with anticipation. From the ceiling hung a red bell pull, its fabric vivid against the muted tones of the room. It was a servant's bell, nothing more, or so it appeared. Sir Robert Warboys stepped inside without hesitation. Charles Benson reached for his wrist, offered one final chance to withdraw. Warboys smiled, the kind of smile worn by men who mistake courage for immunity. The door closed, the lock turned. The sound echoed down the hall like a verdict. The men left behind did not return immediately to the dining room. Instead, they followed Charles Benson to the back of the house, where the servants' quarters lay dormant for the night. Above the beds was a line of bells, each corresponding to a room above. Benson pointed to one in particular. That bell, he explained, was connected to the red pull in the room now occupied by Warboys. If it rang, something had gone wrong. The story of that room did not begin with Sir Robert Warboys. It had existed long before him, embedded into the walls like rot beneath paint. Years earlier, the house had been owned by another man, one whose family history was marked by shame and secrecy. His brother, radical, unstable, and increasingly unmanageable, had been confined to that second-floor bedroom. Locked away from society, from light, from mercy, he deteriorated. What remained of him, when he finally died, was not peace. After his death, servants spoke of sounds wailing that rose and fell without rhythm, cries that ceased the moment a door was opened. Furniture shifted on its own. Objects appeared where they had not been left. At night, witnesses described a presence, not shaped like a man, but not formless either. A grey mass that clung to corners and walls, as if the room itself were breathing something out. It became known simply as the Nameless Thing, not because it lacked identity, but because no name felt adequate. Not everyone believed the stories. Skeptics dismissed them as superstition amplified by fear and rumour. So Robert Warboys was among those skeptics. To him, the room was a challenge wrapped in myth, an opportunity to prove that courage and rationality triumphed over folklore. He expected boredom, perhaps discomfort, certainly victory. Hours passed in the servants' quarters as his friends waited, cards dealt silently, eyes returning again and again to the bell. Midnight approached. Fatigue settled in, thick and oppressive. Then the scream tore through the house. It was not human in any familiar sense. It was raw, unfiltered terror, the sound of something encountering a reality it could not escape. The bell began to ring endlessly, metal striking metal with frantic urgency. The men ran. Charles Benson ran with them. The staircase blurred beneath their feet. The screaming stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Silence rushed in to fill the void, heavy and suffocating. At the end of the hall, the door stood closed once more. A single weapon shot rang out from behind it, sharp and final. They broke the door down with brute force and desperation. Inside, the room was chaos, contained within stillness. The bell pull had been torn from the ceiling. A weapon lay near the bed. A bullet hole scarred the wall. Sir Robert Warboys lay rigid atop the mattress, eyes wide, mouth contorted into an expression no living man should wear. He clutched the red ribbon in death as tightly as he had in terror. The coroner would later rule his death as heart failure under unknown circumstances. But those present that night required no formal conclusion. They had seen what fear could do when it encountered something that did not retreat, something that did not obey the rules of reason. Ownership of 50 Berkeley Square changed hands many times in the decades that followed, yet the second-floor bedroom remained largely untouched. Visitors spoke of unease, of pressure in the chest, of a sense of being watched by something without eyes. Some refused to enter the room at all. Others entered and left changed, quieter, less certain. The house stands still, its walls holding stories that refuse to fade. The bell pull is gone, the furniture replaced, the decor modernized, but the space remains. It waits, and those who know its history understand that some rooms do not forget, and some challenges are not meant to be answered. What do you believe was truly in that room? Tell me if you would have taken the key. Share your verdict in the comments below. Follow for more real stories where history and horror collide.